I'm delighted to be speaking with Jane Coope, Professor Emerita, School of Music, and brilliant concert pianist tonight. Let me first acknowledge that this event is taking place on the unceded ancestral territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and we are grateful to live and work here. The Senior Scholars Series is an initiative of the UBC Emeritus College. It's been run in conjunction with Green College since 2011. We have two more presentations this term, both on Thursdays at 5 o'clock. I'll be talking with Michael Klein, Faculty of Medicine, on February 11th, and with Carl Walters, Department of Zoology and Institute for Oceans and Fisheries on March 18th. You can find details on the Green College and Emeritus College websites. We're going to open today with a piece of Jane's music, and then she and I will have a 45-minute conversation, 45 minutes or so, followed by a question and answer. Please type a question or a comment on chat down at the bottom of your screen at any time during the hour, and I'll relay it to Jane at the appropriate moment, probably during the Q&A. Or if you have your video on, you can raise your hand during the Q&A segment and we will unmute your microphone and you can ask your question aloud in person. But if your video isn't on, we can't see you raise your hand, so you'll have to use the chat function. At the end of the hour at 6 o'clock or 6:10 or so, Jane will hang around and answer further questions because she's so nice. We call this segment of the show Happy Hour. So feel free to leave if you wish, but also feel free if you'd like to stay to pour yourself a glass of wine or not, and stick around to chat for a few more minutes. At 6:15, we will end with a special musical treat from Jane and Chopin that you won't want to miss. So you might want to keep your dinner warm until 6:30. Now to the reason why we're here. One of our national musical treasures, Jane Coope, has toured extensively throughout North America, Europe, and Asia. She's been a soloist with the Principal Orchestras of Canada, as well as London's Royal Philharmonic, the Seattle and Portland Symphonies, the Hong Kong Philharmonic, and the radio orchestras of Bavaria and Holland. And she's played in festivals across Canada, Europe, and the US and Japan. Jane has released 15 CDs in repertoire ranging from Bach to recent commissions. She was professor of piano and chamber music and head of piano at UBC for over 30 years, the last 9 as Distinguished University Scholar. In 2012, Jane was awarded the Order of Canada. In 2017, the Order of British Columbia. And she's here to tell us about her travels and her life music. But first, let's watch and listen to Jane play this short piece from Brahms, Intermezzo in A minor, Opus 76. So tell us how you and the piano met, Jane. Where did you grow up, and when did you start playing, and why did you start playing, and why did you keep playing, and
Why did I keep playing? That's a
all
big
the
question. Well, I grew up in Calgary, and my parents were music lovers for sure, not musicians at all, but they listened to records, those old 45s, those red ones that were on the record changer, and we used to have music in our house a lot. And my parents found this wonderful, wonderful teacher who had just come back from Juilliard, actually. She was about 23 and she was back home and wanted to start her own teaching studio. And I don't know how we managed to get in there, but my sister and I both studied with her. And I credit her with giving me a kid a real inspiration. She called me Flash, and she used a pen with 3 colors, and she gave me stickers and the whole thing. And but mainly she had this fantastic energy that just absolutely lifted me up. And I was with her for about 6 years, and then she moved away, and I went to her teacher, who was one of the big teachers in Canada, happened to be in Calgary again. Luck, real luck. Um, and so, music was always part of my life. I guess I happened to be pretty good at it. And when it came time to go to university, my teacher had probably wanted to send me to New York, but she died in the last year of my high school, and I didn't feel that motivated to do that or that connected. So I went to Toronto to study with Anton Querty, who I had seen on television, I'd heard about, and that turned out to be fantastic. I've just had a lot of luck all the way along the way. And I won a big competition, national competition, when I was 19, and that sort of set me on the road. I never really made the decision to be a musician, I have to say, Jerry. I just fell into it.
I think a lot of us fall into whatever it is we become. But so you went to Toronto and studied piano at U of T
Yes,
and
it's
got your
music.
degree in piano.
That's right. Yes, there's a big music faculty at U of T, and I did my undergraduate studies there.
I just want to flash back a little bit to a little bit earlier. So did your parents like make you practice 6 hours a day? Was
No,
it that
no,
kind of
no,
scenario?
no, because they didn't really know that that's what you were supposed to do. I did my practicing all the way up until I left for Toronto in the morning at home before school, because I thought I would just get it out of the way. And, I think my parents, by the time I was really, a professional musician, they just couldn't believe it.
So there weren't any obsessives in your house.
No,
You
no,
weren't
no.
obsessive about practicing, obviously.
That's right. I'm grateful for that, because whatever decisions I made for myself,
Yeah. So you had a more or less normal childhood rather
more
than
or
the kind of
less.
strange childhood that child prodigies sometimes have.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, maybe that's not a good thing in some ways. I might have been able to play 24 Chopin etudes by the time I was 12, but that hasn't seemed to have hampered me really that much. And I'm happy to have had that childhood time.
Hmm. So what happened after university?
Well, I went to London for a year just to live there and play for some people and go to concerts and just generally live in the London community, which was fantastic. And then after that, I came back and went to the Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore to study with the great Leon Fleischer. And in the meantime, I've been starting to play some concerts. When I was in Toronto, I was playing some concerts in the smaller centers in Ontario. And because the competition I won was sponsored by CBC Radio, I had quite a bit of exposure across the country, which is just not something that will happen these days. I lived in a magical time, I think. Hopefully still.
Yeah, yeah.
So I studied again with Leisure, and then things just seemed to be directing me in the path of being a musician. I mean, I was a musician already, and whatever happened, I was going to stay a musician, and that's the way it's happened for me.
Do you remember your first professional gig?
Well, as I say, my first professional gigs were in small towns in Ontario, and I wanted to tell a couple of stories about that. I think it's much more interesting to hear stories than to actually say, well, I played here and there and there, everywhere. So in Guelph, I had a noon hour concert with the trio. I was still at the University of Toronto, and we had a faculty trio. And our manager had arranged a few concerts for us, and one of them was at the University of Guelph, and it was a noon hour concert. And we took the bus there, and we got there, and we opened up our cases and got ready. And I realized I'd left the music for the main piece at home. I have lots of stories like that, but anyway, so and I couldn't get the music at Guelph. They didn't have it, so I had to play a lot of solos in that concert. So it was supposed to be a chamber music concert. And then another story is that I was playing a concert in Gravenhurst, way up in north of Ontario. And I was playing a big long piece of Schumann, and in the middle, I could feel that the pedal lyre was starting to shake and become loose, and it actually comes off, that's what they do when they move pianos. So I could feel that the further I went in the piece, this thing was going to actually come right off the piano. So I stopped. Luckily, it was a piece that was made up of 18 short pieces. So I stopped at the end of one and said, "Excuse me." And I got down on the floor under the piano on my back. I know how this goes. So I put it back together and, twisted the toggle and then got up and went on. But, I mean, you have to do what you have to do.
And that would be probably one of the most memorable concerts that anybody in your audience would have seen. Those are the things you remember.
Maybe.
So, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask, so after Johns Hopkins, did you turn professional, or I guess you'd already been professional, but yeah. you worked as a performer for a while before you came to academics?
Well, actually, when I moved back to Toronto after being in Baltimore, Anton Querty, my former teacher, asked me if I would like to be his assistant, because he was a very, very busy pianist at the time. And so I jumped at the chance. He had a great class of people, fantastic class. So it was up to me to teach them almost half the time because he was away so much. Mm-hmm. And I learned such a wonderful amount of teaching, I don't know, techniques and everything from that experience. And it really set me up to apply for the UBC job, which just came across again, another stroke of luck. I was walking around the halls in the University of Toronto, probably on my way to the washroom, and I saw an ad for the job at UBC, and I knew Vancouver because my grandparents lived here. And so I thought, well, I've been at this wonderful, big, diverse university, Toronto, and I've loved the arts classes I took, the classes outside of music. And so if I had my choice, that's the kind of job I would love to have, so that I would be playing, I would be in the midst of academia, even though I'm not really part of it. I am sort of part of it. And so I applied, and the gods were with me.
Did you think you were going to have to give up your professional career in order to take on the academic career?
No, no, because it's well known that if you're in a music department or faculty at any university worth its salt, the faculty, performing faculty, is supposed to perform.
Right, of
So
course. That's
yeah,
those are your publications.
that's right. That's right. So I didn't have any worries about that, and I didn't need to have any worries. My faculty colleagues and bosses were always incredibly encouraging and let me have a great deal of freedom to travel and play as much as I could within certain limits. I did
Yes.
have to I did have to make up the teaching, but I loved the teaching. So it was a great job, wonderful.
So yeah, so obviously a faculty like that, and I was in the theater in part, and those faculties, performing arts faculties, make allowances for their faculty to work professionally outside of school hours, but it's still a juggling act, isn't it? I mean, it must have been at times kind of insane for you trying to work both ends and have a family, raise a child.
Yeah, it's insane is the only word for it, really. I don't really know how I did it when I look back now. Especially when it came to be around March, when all the students have recitals and you're holding their hand and coaching them and going to their recitals every evening, 5-6 nights a week, and still trying to prepare for your own concerts. It is crazy. It is crazy, but it happened.
Did you ever feel that you were surrendering part of your professional life, that you were kind of cutting into what potentially you might have done if you had had greater freedom? Did the conflict ever kind of make you have second thoughts about trying to do both?
I have to say no. I mean, there were crazy times, and sometimes when I thought, oh, I would just really like to take this whole month off from UBC so that I could just get myself ready for some of these things that are coming up. Certainly, there were times like that, but I never really felt, oh, I should not have taken this job because I might have had more playing opportunities, or I might have, risen higher in the performing world. I never felt that. I never felt that. So, yeah.
And when did you begin to record your work?
Well, that was really quite soon after I got to Vancouver. I had been thinking about it, and I decided that to follow my teacher Querti's footsteps and make my own recordings and start my own little company. So it was, I think, 1981 that I started making recordings. I've made some for other companies since then, but that was a wonderful way for me to control what I recorded, the repertoire that I recorded, and how it was done, and editing it, and so that was good. It was just yet another crazy aspect of the life.
So do you have a studio in your home?
No. I mean, this is my studio to practice in. No, I always had to record in another venue, like a church. That video was in Piatt Hall, for instance. I recorded in the Chan Center, sometimes in Toronto, just various places.
Okay. So I know that one of the things you really wanted to talk about tonight was your travels and the stories that were generated by your various travels. So why don't we begin? Why don't we send you on the road domestically first? Tell us a little bit about your Canadian tours and some of the highlights, some of the lowlights.
Well, I told you a couple of those high/low lights,
Yeah.
but I can remember a couple of others. I was playing a concerto, one of my first appearances with orchestra, professional appearances with orchestra in Peterborough, Ontario, and just before about a couple of hours before the concert, I cut my thumb on I was reaching into my wash kit and I cut my thumb on my razor
Ooh.
quite badly. It was bleeding like crazy. So I put a Band-Aid on it and just thought, well, I just have to do it anyway. And I got to the hall, and usually before a concerto with piano, there's an overture the orchestra plays, a short piece, and then they move the piano on, and then you do the concerto with piano. So I was standing back there holding my thumb as tightly as I could, and they were moving the piano on to the stage, and the back the back leg buckled under the piano, caught on something on the stage and buckled, and the whole piano fell down on a guy's foot.
This didn't fall down on your thumb.
Didn't fall down. I was backstage. That just didn't happen with me. So, but I was standing backstage waiting, and all of a sudden, one of the guys who was moving the piano came off backstage, and he looked terrible. I said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "The piano fell on my foot," and then he fell right over in a big faint. So, they came and carted him away in an ambulance, and then I walked on, and it's the piece I was playing starts with a great sort of rush of chords all the way down the piano, and I did that thing, and then I looked at the keys, and they were all red.
Couldn't you play with 9 fingers?
There was that. Yeah. Oh, another little story was I was playing a tour in southern Manitoba, and I'm crazy about pierogies or pierogi or however you say them. And it was a Mennonite town, very small town, in which there were, I think, 400 people in the whole town, and 300 of them were at the concert. It was just amazing. But they prepared a wonderful feast of Mennonite food for me, and I was just in absolute heaven. That was after the concert. And another little small town was I was playing some late Beethoven, which is, the really profound stuff. And I got to the hall, and there was sitting on the stage an upright piano, which I don't know if you know much about that, but it's not like a piano. It's another thing. And it had it had one key that didn't sound, and a couple of keys that didn't have the ivories on the top anymore. So I had to deal with that. So it's been interesting. My final Canadian story actually happened quite recently. I was invited to play a concert in Snow Lake, Manitoba.
Snow Lake.
Snow Lake, Manitoba, which is way up north. So I flew up to Thompson and rented a car. They gave me a big, huge SUV, which I'd never driven before, and I drove straight west on a highway in the middle of winter. Nobody on the road at all except me. Nobody for 3 hours, and I got to the place I was supposed to be staying, which was a resort. It's usually a fishing resort, and I went to the main lodge. It wasn't very big, and there was just a note saying, "Jane Coope, your cabin is number 2." So I found it. Nobody around at all. Nobody in the office, nobody around anywhere, but the door to cabin 2 was open. So I made my way there, and then I drove into town, and it was the most amazing setup. This guy had moved up. He was a piano teacher in Winnipeg, I think, and he moved up to Snow Lake where his brother lived, and he turned his little bungalow into a concert space. He took out all the walls on the main floor and put in some seats, and he had a very nice piano, and he invites people from all over the area, Flin Flon and places and all over there within 2-3 hours.
Yeah.
And people came, and I played the concert, and it was just the most fantastic, wonderful experience. And afterwards, I had great conversations with people who were there. One guy came up to me and said, "I just can't believe that Brahms is so contrapuntal. I mean, it's not the sort of thing you expect somebody from a fishing town in northern Manitoba to sort of hear." Anyway, so I've loved all those experiences.
Do you generally find, or have you generally found that small town venues are more satisfying than big city venues?
Well, they have their satisfaction because you definitely feel more more connected because they're usually smaller halls,
Yeah.
and you know, before the concert, during, after, you see them, you can see their reactions, whereas a big hall, there's a big distance between you and the audience. um, s- on the other hand, the venues in big places are usually a little bit better.
Better acoustics.
Better acoustics, better pianos.
You don't have to shovel your own way into cabin
That's
number
right.
2.
That's right.
So you've traveled quite a bit in Europe too, I understand, and especially Eastern Europe. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, I have. Yes, I have. My first tour, big tour, was when I was pretty young. I was just out of my graduate studies, and I got asked to do a tour in Bulgaria.
Hmm.
Bulgaria of all places. So I flew over there, flew to London, then I flew to Sofia, and in my incredible naivete, I neglected to get a visa, a visa. So I ended up at the airport in Sofia, and my guide slash translator had to fight for me to get in with the immigration people, but she did it. I got there, and she spoke only Bulgarian, Russian, and a tiny bit of French. So we had eight or 10 days together with not a whole lot of intimate conversations. But anyway, it was a very interesting tour. We would travel by train in, you know, the worst possible economy, not even economy, you know, where the seats are really hard and it's rough and there's nothing to eat. And we'd get to a place, and we'd go to the office of the hall with the manager there, and the manager and my translator would sit and talk for at least 45 minutes. Don't ask me what they were talking about, but it must have been something. So I had to sit there and wait in the room. And then at the end of that, the manager would hand me a, a plastic bag full of Bulgarian, um, what is it called? Lev or Zev, or I can't remember the type of
Currency?
money. Bills, a lot of bills,
Yeah.
big thick wad of them. and then, and then I would go and have maybe 45 minutes on the piano, go back to the hotel, change, go back, play the concert, and then have something to eat after that. One of the interesting things that happened all over Eastern Europe was that usually, almost all of these tours I did were in the winter time.
Of
And
course.
the heat was often not turned on in the country for more than, say, 6, 8 hours in the day. And by the time it came to the night, the heat was off again. So it was freezing, just freezing. And one of the concerts I did in Moscow, I came on and played the first piece. I was absolutely freezing. My hands would barely even work. And I saw that people in the audience had their coats on. So I went back off stage and I put my own coat on, came back on and played the rest of the concert.
And
So
what is this? Is this Soviet times?
yeah, that was Soviet times. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. But there were some wonderful audiences and wonderful concerts. I mean, I would be playing in the main concert venue of the city, of some of these big cities like Belgrade and Warsaw, and even though they were cold, it was fantastic. Really, I really felt part of a huge history and
Yeah.
community, and the audiences were wonderful.
I bet they knew the music.
They really knew music. They really knew music. One of the things that happened to me in the Bulgarian tour was after a concert in I don't know, Plovdiv or somewhere. We were at having something to eat afterwards, and a man came and sat beside me and said, you know, I've been waiting for months for you to get here because I wanted to practice my English. I've been studying English from a book for the last 10 years and I want to see how I do. Well, he didn't say it in that fluent a way, but pretty fluent. And then we had a conversation in which he told all sorts of jokes and stories in English from a book. And I just thought, well, you're amazing, amazing,
That's
amazing.
pretty amazing.
But talking about some of the wonderful things that were in place in Eastern Europe. I did a radio broadcast in Warsaw, and in the studio there was there were two pianos to choose from, and there was a technician who sat there for the whole 4-hour session that I was there, waiting for me to say, well, that note isn't really perfect. Can you make that a little bit softer, or can you fix the pedal squeak? Or you could, no, that never happens in the Western world.
Mhm.
Never happens. And so I chose the piano. It was a beautiful, beautiful Steinway, Hamburg Steinway. And the producer said, I'm so sorry about the pianos. We're getting a new one. We're getting a new one soon. And this was also way back in the time when there was nothing in Warsaw.
Yeah.
I couldn't even buy a winter hat because there were just nothing except books, lots of people, lots of music, art, but just amazing. So anyway, I did this broadcast, and she was a very tough producer. If she didn't like something that I had done, she'd maybe do it over again. And I worked really hard. And then, but I kept thinking, well, when is she going to say that's enough? You know, thank you very much, bye bye.
Yeah.
But she kept saying, well, do you have anything else? Do you have anything else? I think I could have gone on for about 12 hours. She was so wonderful that way and so encouraging. And they paid by the minute, the amount of minutes you got in the can.
Wow.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Wow. Wow. So a lack of consumer goods, but a whole lot of culture,
Oh, yeah.
an appetite
Oh,
for culture, obviously.
exactly. And sense of humor. I
Yeah.
noticed that so much with people that I met. Fantastic.
Do you think it had something to do with the cultural context or the
Yeah, and
musical context? Does piano bring out the comic in folks?
well, I think if you don't have a sense of humor in times like that, it's pretty tough to stay above the difficulties.
Yeah, yeah. What was your favorite venue in Europe? What's
Oh,
in
my favorite venue was definitely St. Petersburg.
yeah?
Yeah, I was doing a tour which was which was organized by Goskoncert, which was the Russian concert agency. And so they were responsible for telling me what cities and what venues, etc. So they put me at St. Petersburg. They put me into the big concert hall, a big, fantastic Bolshoi hall where Horowitz played, you know, and Rubinstein. So I went there about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and there were 3 pianos that I could choose from, and a guy, the technician, sitting there reading a book, and very quietly, and you know, said, you may choose. So I chose the piano I wanted. It was rough because they were all fantastic instruments, fabulous. So he rolled it quietly onto the stage, and then I practiced, came back, stayed in a hotel right across the street. And I was looking at the guest book at the hotel. Guess who stayed there? Gustav Mahler.
Not the
1904.
same, not the same year as
1904,
Coope.
not the same. So it was a beautiful hotel, really elegant, kind of run down, but it's beautiful nevertheless. So I went across to the hall, concert time, and I was sitting in the green room, which is one of these places that has silk on the walls instead of wallpaper, and beautiful candelabra. And I said to my KGB agent translator, could you just see if anybody's out there, because it's a big hall, and you know, who am I in Russia? It's zero. So she looked out and she came back and said, it's full. 2,000 people. So, and I think what that tells you is that they go to concerts not for the star system, but for the music. And I got the feeling that people knew that music, really knew that music, because I went and played. This was about the 8th concert I'd done on this tour, so I was feeling pretty relaxed about it. And I mean, the combination of great instrument, fantastic hall, audience who were just absolutely quiet as anything and attentive, was just heaven. I'll never forget it.
Do you remember what you played?
Yes, yes, I played some Mozart and Beethoven, Opus 111, and Fauré and Chopin and Ravel.
No Russians.
No Russians. Russians can play Russian. No, I love Russian music, but I wasn't playing any of that for that tour.
Good. And so that was pretty much all Eastern Europe, Western Europe,
Right.
no stories?
Oh yes, yes, yes. I mean, one of my other top hits was playing in Wigmore Hall, which is a fantastic venue, also beautiful, beautiful acoustic, and so many people have played there. I just felt.
Sorry, where is that?
Wigmore Hall in London. Sorry.
In London.
Sorry, should have said that, in London. And also another wonderful old theater in Paris, Salle Gaveau, which has been around for many, many decades and years, and has seen many, many pianists. Yes, I've done lots of things in Western Europe too, but it was the Eastern Europe concerts somehow that seemed so special to me.
Hmm.
Because of course in London, they have a concert every 5 minutes.
Right.
So,
Right. And so should we travel to Asia?
Sure. Oh, I just had one more little story, and that was when I did a tour in Slovakia.
Yes.
And that was right from one end of the country to the other, with a driver who also spoke only Slovakian and German. And so again, we were all day together in the car. Not much conversation going on. I had 1 year of German, so I didn't really have a lot to say. But anyway, and we were coming back from that tour, and we were in Bratislava, and my flight for home left from Vienna, so you have to cross into Austria. And this was still when the wall, wait a minute, no, was the wall down? Yeah, no, the wall was still up. So it was still, difficult to get back and forth. And there was about a 3 or 4 hour car lineup to get across the border while they checked all the cars underneath, and trunks and everything. And I really thought I was going to miss my flight. And finally, my driver got out of the car and went up to the gate and did a sob story and said, "I've got this woman. She's crying. She has to get back. She has to get to Vienna. Please, can't you let us do?" And they did. So that was a good.
Sensitive Westerner.
Yeah, well, I wasn't crying at all, but
Of course not.
Okay. Anyway, Asia. Well, I've had a few interesting experiences in China. I've also played some in Japan and Taiwan, but China has the most stories. I did some teaching at the Central Conservatory in Beijing and Shanghai, the two biggest conservatories, and the kids who were playing for me were amazing. No question about it. It was hard to find things to say. One of my young people who played for me in Beijing was the 11-year-old Lan Lan.
Really?
Yeah. He was fantastic. Little chubby little guy with this grin on his face. Completely, I can hardly believe it's the same person that you see these days. But he played fabulously, and so did many of the people I heard. Great teaching there. Lots of faculty members who had studied in Europe, Germany, Austria, so they knew what was what. Concert life was another thing altogether, because especially when I first played in Beijing, I can't remember what year that was, but people would get up and go and visit with each other in the middle of the concert, talk about what they did on the weekend, and or go and get something to eat. It was just as if it were just the circus, or any kind, or movie, or
Football
not even a
game.
movie. So I really had to concentrate to keep myself focused, because there's all this activity going on in the hall, and that happened to me in a few places in China. And you had to just take it all as part of the
Wow.
scene.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have to be culturally adaptable when you're traveling across
Yes.
the world, I guess, like that.
You
You
so
gotta
do.
understand different protocols and.
Well, I probably, if I'd been some sort of very famous person, uh, the people who were putting on the concert would probably have taken a bit more care. But that's okay. I really loved just getting along, being part of it, surviving, really.
Did you find a difference between mainland China and Taiwan in terms of audience?
Yes. In all sorts of ways. Taiwan definitely had a concert life going on. And I did a residency at one of the universities there, which was very well equipped, beautiful hall, and well organized, and they knew about concerts. But even so, I would say that throughout Asia at that time, which was, well, it's been over a few years, but maybe up to maybe 15 years ago, there hasn't really been as much of a sense of wanting to hear other people play. It's more what we want to do, and people can come in from overseas and help us and tell us, advise us and coach us, so that we can go back over there and be a big success. So there's a lot of that. There was a lot of that, and I think in a way there still is.
So you think that the audience would have been more attentive to a native pianist?
Well, no, because even though these were young people who were amazing players, it's really about competitions and who's going to win and who's going to do the best. It's very, very competitive over there. I think it's changing. It has to change, but at that time it was.
And Japan?
Well, Japan, it was Japan. Everything is just absolutely organized down to the hilt, and I think that the experience was different there, because even though they didn't have a lot of concerts except in the huge halls with the orchestra, that was always been a big thing in Japan. Recitals like the ones I was doing, not so much, but Japanese people did not get up and talk about the weekend. They absolutely listened, and so it was different. It was different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, do you think that any of this has to do with the fact that the tradition of Western music in Asia is much more recent than, say, in Eastern Europe?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Where for centuries they've been listening to this music, and they know how to listen to it, and they know the appropriate ways to listen to it.
Yes, they know the culture. Absolutely, but I have to say that I've had a lot of experience with Asian musicians, Korean and Chinese and Taiwanese and Japanese, coming over here and playing in the schools of music in North America, and they're fantastic. I mean, there's just no sense that this has been a recent development in those countries. They've got it, and they have the work ethic to prove it too.
Yeah, so the audiences are maybe a little behind the actual performers of the players.
Yeah, and probably that's changed.
Yeah, for sure. What has life been like for you? Well, one, post retirement from UBC, and two, during the pandemic, as a pianist, as a performer, as a teacher.
Right. Well, I probably should say, oh, it's been terrible not being able to play for audiences, live audiences. It's just been, I've been suffering, but I haven't been suffering. I've been really enjoying using this time to work on my own. Well, this has happened since I left teaching, to work on my own playing and sort of refine my own skills and read more and try to use the things I tried to teach for all those years for myself. So I've been learning new repertoire, some just studies to try to work on my hands to get them even better, and just new repertoire. And I've just been having a great time, I have to say. When it's time to start traveling again, I don't know how I'm going to feel about that. But I'm working right now on such an exciting project, which I'm going to be doing in about 3 weeks. I'm playing with members of the Vancouver Symphony, not the whole orchestra, obviously, but with 10 members. I'm doing 2 concerti, Mozart and Beethoven, for a video which they'll put on their site. So, and I've had to arrange the orchestra part for these 10 instruments. And so that's been an interesting experience for me. I hope it works out.
And have you done that before? Have you arranged?
Nope.
No. Oh, wow.
Well, that's not true. I did arrange one concerto a long time ago, a Chopin concerto for a very small group. Yeah, that's true. I did about 20 years ago, but it's been
Oh, well then.
it's been a while.
And you're teaching a master class or two?
Yes, I just did some online master classes. I mean, I really do not like doing online master classes because you can't really hear very well over Zoom. You have to use Zoom because it's the only one that allows the only
Platform.
that's right, platform that allows many people at a time. So you had to have 10 people listening. It's tough. It's tough to try to figure that out, but I guess it's better than not having it. And last summer I was trying to teach chamber music. I go to a chamber music festival every year in Maine, in the state of Maine. And obviously we couldn't do that. And so I was trying to put chamber music together on Zoom. It was just really difficult, really difficult. And I don't know how to edit iMovies and things like that. Luckily, the young people do know how to do that, so they put things together.
I was going to ask you earlier when you talked about your various touring adventures. When you went out on tour, when you go out on tour, do you just go by yourself? Like you don't have an entourage?
No. If I'm just going to, if I'm going to any place in Canada, I do go by myself. Usually when I've gone much further afield, George, my husband, has come with me because he wants to see these countries. And I feel happy about that because sometimes, I mean, I have been on my own in these. I was on my own in Bulgaria and some other places, but it is nice to have company when you're trying to cope with some of the interesting scenarios.
Have you ever felt unsafe as a woman traveling alone in these exotic places?
Yeah, I haven't. Luckily, no, I haven't. But I haven't been traveling to places which are so remote that it would be a little scary.
I don't know. Snow Lake sounds pretty.
Well, actually, yeah, that was scary because when I was driving these 3 hours, I had no cell phone reception. So if
Right.
I'd gone off the road, nobody was there going to pick me up. So I thought better be careful.
Well, we're glad you didn't. And so, no online concerts?
Well, this Vancouver Symphony thing is
Oh,
going
of
to be an
course.
online, and then I'm doing actually 2 other online concerts coming up. One is chamber music in March, part of the UBC Wednesday noon concerts, which they're filming at the Chan, and that's chamber music. And then another one for a local chamber music group called Beta Chamber Music, and that's also being filmed at the Chan. That's in May.
And all of this information is on your website, is it?
Well,
Should be.
yes, okay, okay, I'll put it up.
And can you tell us what your website address is? JaneCoope.com?
That's right, just www.janecoope.com.
Okay,
I
that's
don't
great.
think there are too many Coopes around.
Well, Jane, that's fantastic. What a wonderful, exciting, adventurous, creative life you're having.
Well, I have to admit, I've loved it all the way along, and I still am.
Well, if there are no more questions, I think we should listen to Jane and watch Jane playing Chopin Polonaise Fantasy Opus 61. But before we do that, Alan, I want to say, Jane, thank you so much for this. It's just been delightful and illuminating.
That's a real pleasure. Thank you for letting me go on and on about my
Oh, no.
little stories.
All right. So, Alan, if you could start the recording, please. Thank you all for attending.
Jane Coope.